If you had asked me back in high school how I imagined opening my college acceptance letter, I would have said something dramatic. Maybe confetti falling from the ceiling. My mom crying happy tears while holding my hand. Me jumping around the living room, screaming like I'd just been drafted into the NBA. You know, typical first-gen college kid fantasy. What I didn't imagine was sitting in our kitchen, holding the letter in one hand and a mug of expired powdered hot chocolate in the other, while my mom scrolled Instagram and said flatly, "We'll figure something out." I had just gotten into Syracuse University, my dream school. Full acceptance, no scholarship. Tuition? $52,000 a year. Now, I knew it wouldn't be cheap. But for as long as I could remember, there was a magic phrase my mom loved to repeat every time we passed up movie nights, birthday parties, and even pizza nights. "It's all going into your college fund, sweetheart." She made it sound like a sacred vault. When my dad passed away when I was 10, she'd even told me, "Your father made sure we had a cushion. He always wanted you to go to college." At 12, she refused to get cable so we could prioritize your future. At 14, she wouldn't buy me a PS4 because tuition will thank us later. At 16, I worked weekends to save up for books because she said, "Let's not touch the fund unless it's an emergency." So, naturally, when I got into Syracuse, I assumed this mythical fund, my fund, was finally going to step up and carry the torch. Turns out, my college fund had already been torched. The first red flag was when I tried to set up the payment plan with the university. The financial officer looked at her screen, squinted, and said, "The 529 plan linked to your file, there's a zero balance. It says it was withdrawn in full 8 months ago." I laughed. Like, full-on cackled. "That can't be right," I said. "My mom's been contributing to that fund my whole life. It's for college. My dad set it up before he passed." The woman gave me a gentle, "I've seen this before" smile. "I'm really sorry," she said, "but it looks like the funds were transferred out. I can give you a copy of the withdrawal statement if you want to ask her." So I did. I went home, walked straight into the living room where my mom was sitting cross-legged on the couch, watching a YouTube video titled, "Manifest Your Spa Business in 90 Days," and sipping cucumber water from a mason jar. I asked, "Where's my college fund?" She paused the video like I'd just interrupted a national emergency broadcast. There was a long, heavy silence. Then she said it. "I used it." Just like that. I blinked. "You used it? On what?" She stood up slowly, the way someone does when they're about to explain something you're absolutely not going to like. "It was an opportunity. Your Aunt Laura, she brought me in on something big. A franchise." "A franchise?" "A spa. Wellness, Brandon. Salt scrubs, aromatherapy, chakra alignment. It's called Serenity and Salt. Isn't that brilliant?" I genuinely thought I was having a stroke. "You used my entire college fund to open a spa with Aunt Laura? She's very business-minded now," Mom snapped, suddenly on the defensive. "She went to a Tony Robbins seminar and everything." I sat down. Not because I needed to. Because my knees literally gave out. She went on, faster now, like if she said it quick enough, I wouldn't notice how insane it was. "It's a boutique concept. We invested in a franchise license. It's holistic. Sustainable. And it's going to take off, Brandon. Trust me. It's already getting buzz." "Buzz where?" I asked. "The bees outside your window?" She narrowed her eyes. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said. "You're being delusional." It got ugly. I said things I'm not proud of. She said things that didn't make sense, like, "You don't need college to succeed," and, "This is how generational wealth starts." She kept calling it our investment, which was weird considering I hadn't agreed to anything besides taking the SATs. Eventually, I stopped talking. What was the point? I wasn't going to college, not this year. Maybe not ever. My mom had taken my future and traded it for foot scrubs and pastel candles. And all I could think was, I didn't just lose tuition. I lost trust. The funny part is, I wasn't even mad at first. Not really. I was too shocked to feel anything useful. It was like finding out the fire extinguisher you've been told would save your life was actually just full of glitter and broken dreams. The day after my mom told me she used my college fund for a spa franchise, I woke up thinking it had to be a dream. Maybe a fever dream. Maybe she was pranking me for some YouTube social experiment I didn't know we were part of. Spoiler, she wasn't. The next morning, she was back in the kitchen making vegan adaptogenic chia muffins and listening to a podcast about grounding your finances with intention. She wore a beige tunic that looked like it had been sewn by a sad monk and kept muttering things like, "Aunt Laura says this is the future," and "Trust the abundance." I didn't trust abundance. I trusted FAFSA. And FAFSA had already laughed me out of their office. Turns out, when you once had a healthy college fund, even if it's now a smoldering hole of eucalyptus oil and bankruptcy, the government still counts it as an asset when calculating aid. My name was still tied to that 529 account. So I didn't qualify for any of the need-based grants or state scholarships. Because technically, I used to have money. Technically, my mom set it on fire. So there I was, freshly accepted to college with nowhere to go, no money, and the most expensive lesson in trust a kid could buy. To add insult to injury, and Laura came over that week to show my mom mock-ups for the salt room layout. Her words, not mine. This woman, who once tried to sell me essential oils for masculinity imbalance, walked in wearing $4 flip-flops and a white robe like she was auditioning for a cult. "Bran," she chirped. "Oh my gosh, so exciting about Syracuse." "Yeah, I won't be going," I said deadpan. She blinked. "Oh. Right, you're gonna take a gap year. That's honestly better. So healing." I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked, "How much did you two invest?" Laura smiled like she was unveiling a secret. "Only $87,000 total. We each put in 43 and change. It's a steal, honestly. High return potential. And the onboarding retreat in Sedona was so clarifying. You used $43,000 of my college money for a spa startup, and then went to Arizona to vide in the desert?" She tilted her head. "Don't frame it like that. You're being negative." My mom chimed in. "Brandon, don't start. You're always so literal. Laura says you need to open your root chakra." "Oh my God!" I muttered. This is a hostage situation. But they weren't joking. They had legit plans. Custom robes. Herbal tea menus. Himalayan salt lamps in bulk. They'd rented a unit in a rundown strip mall wedged between a failing vape shop and an abandoned Little Caesars. Their soft opening had 3 clients: a woman who thought she was at a dog groomer, a high school girl doing a TikTok trend, and a man who just wanted to use the bathroom. After 3 weeks, the grand opening banner was still taped crookedly across the dusty window. Someone had already graffiti tagged "Free foot fungus" on the glass. Meanwhile, I picked up a job at a coffee shop near campus. Not as a student. As an employee. I told them I was taking a gap year. Left out the part where my mom had committed financial identity fraud by way of organic clay masks. It was humiliating. Every shift, I'd watch students with backpacks and class schedules come in, excited about dorm life, while I scrubbed espresso machines and pretended I didn't want to cry into the whipped cream canister. Some nights, I'd go home and find my mom watching videos about how to attract high-vibration clientele. She'd pause them whenever I walked in. And every time, I wanted to ask her, was it worth it? Was lavender-scented failure more important than my future? But I didn't ask. Because I already knew the answer. She didn't think she'd fail. She just thought I'd bounce back. It started with an email titled, "Exciting news from Serenity and Salt." That's how I knew it was over. The second you see sparkles in a subject line, you're either being scammed or someone's dog is launching a candle brand. I clicked it anyway. Morbid curiosity. Inside was a Canva-designed digital flyer that said, "We're closing our doors, for now. Thank you to our loyal community for your support. Bigger things are coming. Stay grounded, hydrated, and exfoliated. I stared at the screen for a full 30 seconds, trying to decide if this was a joke. It wasn't. The spa had been open for a grand total of 5 weeks. Less time than it takes to grow arugula. No formal announcement from my mom. No warning. Just one sad, oversaturated photo of Aunt Laura holding a sage bundle outside the storefront, smiling like someone who thinks bankruptcy is a spiritual cleanse. I forwarded the email to my personal inbox with the subject line, LOL. Called it. A day later, my phone rang. Mom. I ignored it. She called again. Then texted. Hey, sweetheart. Can we talk? I need some help with something. Please. I should have blocked the number. But part of me was too curious to resist. Like rubbernecking a slow-motion car crash involving salt lamps and generational trauma. I answered on the third call. Her voice was high and soft. I'm in trouble and trying to sound like I care about your feelings. Voice. Brandon, hi honey. What's up? I said flatly. Well, things didn't go exactly as planned. Shocking. There were some issues with the landlord. And parking. And the community wasn't ready for holistic luxury, I think. But that's not what I wanted to talk about. I waited. Silence. Then, I'm in a bit of a tight spot. Financially. There it was. The ask? I could practically hear her trying to put together the pitch in her head. How to frame it as a favor. Or maybe a bridge loan. Or maybe even an opportunity to show maturity. Define tight spot. I said. I'm behind on 2 credit cards. The franchise exit fees were more than expected. I had to cover inventory out of pocket after Laura ghosted me. My credit score took a hit. And I might need help with, just temporarily, some of the debt. I stared at my reflection in the coffee shop window, headset still on, apron still covered in chai syrup, and something in me just cracked. Not loudly. Quietly. Like a knuckle popping before a punch. You want me, I said, to pay off the debt you created by spending my college fund on a Himalayan salt spa that closed before I could even buy my first textbook? She sighed. Brandon, I'm not asking you to pay it all. I just need some help. You've always been so good with money. You're working, right? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so perfectly ironic it felt scripted. I said nothing for a second. Just sat with it. Then I said it. The words that had been sitting in my chest for months. That was my education. This is yours. Silence. A long one. I think she thought she misheard me. What? You took the money that was supposed to fund my future. And you spent it on seaweed wraps and a Pinterest account. I didn't get a say. I didn't get a vote. But I still paid the price. Brandon, please don't. No. I cut her off. You made a decision. Now you get to learn from it. Just like I did. Her voice cracked. So you're really not going to help me? No, I said, voice calm. But I do hope you learned something. I hope it was worth the tuition. She sniffled. I thought we were family. Yeah, I said. Me too. Then I ended the call. I stared at my phone for a long time, half expecting her to call back. She didn't. And she hasn't since. No apology. No follow-up. Just radio silence. And you know what? That silence? It was the best return I've gotten on anything she ever spent. After that call, everything changed, but not in the cinematic, fireworks and redemption way. Nothing exploded. No inspirational montage. Just quiet. A different kind of quiet. Not the silence of being ignored. But the silence that comes when you stop expecting anything from people who keep letting you down. That week, I redid my entire plan. No Syracuse. No dorms. No intro to sociology. With overpriced textbooks and ramen noodle dinners in a shared mini-fridge. I enrolled in a local community college 2 bus stops from the cafe where I worked. It wasn't glamorous. It didn't have ivy-covered brick walls or tenured professors named Dr. Chadwick. But it had night classes. And I could afford them. Barely. I created what I later called the soul-crushing hustle schedule. 4:30 a.m., wake up. 5:30 a.m. to 1 p.m., coffee shop shift. 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., online coursework or in-person class. 7 p.m. to 10:30 p.m., delivery apps. Grubhub, DoorDash, Uber Eats. I was basically a courier for people who feared leaving their homes or cooking spaghetti. Weekends? I'd fill in extra hours wherever I could, catering gigs, temp warehouse jobs, even a sketchy Craigslist moving company that paid in envelopes. Sleep was a rumor. But I kept going. Because what else could I do? What no one tells you is that once you've been betrayed by someone you trust, you're not just rebuilding your life, you're rebuilding your entire definition of what safe feels like. And that takes longer than any class credit. I didn't talk to my mom. I didn't talk to Aunt Laura. I didn't stalk their socials or drive past the shuttered spa window like a sad ex. I just moved forward. Painfully. Slowly. Quietly. Funny enough, life started to reward that. One day, a guy named Luis came into the coffee shop, mid-40s, suit jacket over a Marvel t-shirt, laptop always open. He ordered the same drink every day, black coffee, no sugar, no milk. Like my trust issues. He liked the way I handled customers. "You've got the look of someone who knows when a printer's about to break," he said once. "You studying IT?" "Marketing," I said. "Sort of. Self-taught. I'm just figuring things out." He asked to see my portfolio. I laughed. "I don't have a portfolio." "Make one," he said. "You're sharp." 3 weeks later, he helped me land a remote internship at a small digital agency. Nothing fancy. I was editing product listings and scheduling email blasts. But I was learning. And for the first time since everything fell apart, someone saw value in me that wasn't connected to my GPA or bloodline. At night, when I collapsed onto the borrowed futon in my friend's spare room, shout out to Marcus, MVP of roommates, I'd open my laptop and teach myself new skills. Design. Copywriting. Analytics. I became obsessed with turning my pain into proficiency. That year, I passed every class. Paid every bill. And even had $200 left over for a pair of noise-canceling headphones, the first non-essential thing I'd bought in 14 months. I wore them every day like a trophy. I didn't tell anyone how bad things had gotten. Not the nights I slept in my car when my roommate's landlord had surprise inspections. Not the time I broke down in a grocery store parking lot because my debit card got declined for a $3 frozen meal. Not the ache I felt every time I passed the college bookstore, wondering what my life should have looked like. Because those things didn't define me. What defined me was this. I didn't fold. I didn't quit. I didn't call her back. Let her learn what resilience looks like from the outside. She had her education. Now I was building mine. With blood, sweat, caffeine, and spite. By the time I finished my associate degree, something strange started happening. People began treating me like a real adult. Like I wasn't just the kid who got screwed over by his mom's spa dreams, but a guy who knew things. A guy with value. At work, the agency offered me a part-time junior coordinator role, remote, flexible hours, and actual money. Not much, but enough to quit the delivery apps and finally toss the worn-out hoodie I'd been living in like it was some kind of tragic superhero cape. I moved into a real apartment. Okay, technically it was the upstairs floor of a 1920s duplex with creaky stairs and a window that whistled when it rained, but it was mine. No roommates. No couch crashing. Just me, a futon, and a second-hand desk from Facebook Marketplace. Progress. I also finally did something I'd been terrified of doing for over a year. I looked up my old college's tuition page. Just out of curiosity. You know. For fun. Syracuse tuition had gone up another $2,200. I stared at that number for a while, then closed the tab. Because here's the thing. I didn't need it anymore. I was doing fine without the name brand. Without the dorm experience. Without the cafeteria meal plan or welcome week mixer with glow sticks and lukewarm soda. I was building something on my own. And somehow, that felt even better. One day, on a whim, I posted a short reflection on LinkedIn. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over when I lost my college fund. Turns out, that was the beginning. Here's to learning things the hard way, and still coming out smarter. The post got a dozen likes. Then 200. Then 5,000. Apparently, LinkedIn loves a good underdog story. A recruiter reached out. Then a startup founder. Then someone from the community college who asked me to speak at their next student success panel. I said yes. The event was small, maybe 40 students, but it felt huge. I stood in front of them in a blazer I borrowed from Luis and told them the truth. How I went from cafe worker to intern to marketing coordinator. How I turned betrayal into fuel. How I learned that sometimes, family teaches you exactly what not to become. People clapped. Some even cried. One guy in the back offered me a job. Turned out he owned a local print business and needed someone to fix his email campaigns and maybe teach his nephew how not to suck at Excel. It was surreal. I went home that night feeling 10 feet tall. Until my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't seen in over a year. My mom. I didn't answer. She didn't leave a voicemail. But the next day, she texted. Hi Brandon. I saw your post. I'm really proud of you. Maybe we could grab lunch sometime? I stared at the message for a full 5 minutes. It wasn't mean. It wasn't manipulative. It wasn't begging. But it was convenient. Where was this version of her when I was working 3 jobs just to eat? Where was this version when I cried in a parking lot because my future felt like a joke? Now that I was doing well, she wanted to meet? I didn't respond. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. Because now I finally saw what she never could. Her support was conditional. Mine had to be earned. 2 weeks after her text, my mom showed up. Not with flowers. Not with tears. With a folder. I was coming back from a quick grocery run, arms full of off-brand cereal and almond milk, when I saw her sitting on the front steps of my apartment. She stood as I approached, brushing invisible lint off her shirt like she wasn't completely out of place. Hey, Brandon. Hi. She smiled like we were running into each other at a farmer's market. I didn't know how else to reach you, she said. You've been hard to get a hold of. Some people would call that a boundary. She blinked. Ignored the jab. Can we talk? I didn't want to. But I was curious. So I nodded, opened the door, and let her in, just long enough for her to sit at the tiny kitchen table. She took in the place, the thrift store furniture, the whiteboard full of deadlines, the stack of business cards next to my laptop. You've done well, she said. Really? I mean it. I stayed silent. She hesitated, then pulled the folder from her bag and slid it across the table. What's this? I asked, not touching it. Just information. From a financial advisor. I'm looking at consolidating some of the debt from the spa. I thought maybe you could look it over. Or recommend someone. You're more savvy now. I finally opened it. Inside was a printed breakdown of credit card statements, loan balances, and a business closure report that looked like someone had stapled failure into a scrapbook. She wasn't asking me to pay it. Not yet. But the implication was loud. I looked up. Why are you really here? She sighed, the kind of sigh people use when they want sympathy more than truth. Because I miss you. Because I made mistakes. Because you've always been the smart one. And I don't want this to be how we end. I waited. Nothing about the spa. Nothing about the fact that she stole my future to chase hers. Do you regret it? I asked. The spa. Taking the money. She looked out the window. I regret how it ended. Wrong answer. You don't regret taking it? I pressed. She bit her lip. I just thought you'd bounce back. You always knew how to land on your feet. That did it. I landed on my feet because you pulled the floor out from under me, I said. She winced. That's not fair. It's exactly fair. You gambled with my life. You made a choice without me, and then expected me to thank you for the lesson. She went quiet again. Then, softly, so you're not going to help me? I shook my head. No. But that was my education. Remember? Her mouth tightened. I'm your mother. You're also a woman who chose lavender body wraps over her kid's future. That shut her up. She stood, tucking the folder back into her bag. I guess I misread how bitter you'd still be. I stood too. I'm not bitter. I'm busy. There's a difference. She walked to the door, paused, hand on the knob. You know, Brandon, one day, you might want your family back. I opened the door for her. Maybe. But right now, I don't miss the version that left me behind. She didn't say goodbye. Just walked out. A few months after the apartment showdown, I did something I never thought I'd do. I launched my own business. Nothing flashy. No ribbon cutting or viral TikToks. Just a small but legit digital marketing firm built out of late nights, recycled notebooks, and every painful lesson I'd learned about trust, branding, and not investing in spa crystals for dogs. I called it Second Draft Media, because that's what this was, my second draft at a life they tried to erase. I got my first client the same week I bought a real desk chair, one with actual lumbar support, and wheels that didn't squeak like they were auditioning for a horror movie. Then came a second client. Then a third. Before I knew it, I was making more per month than I would have as an entry-level Syracuse grad still paying off student loans. And I hadn't even touched my backup plan, grad school applications I kept in a folder named, just in case they're right. Spoiler, they weren't. I was doing fine. No, I was thriving. So naturally, that's when she reached out again. It started small. A like on one of my posts. Then a comment. So proud of you, sweetie. Red heart, red heart. I didn't respond. Then came the email. Subject: let's not throw away the good memories. It was exactly what you'd expect from someone who'd never really said sorry. A photo of me at 6 years old, missing teeth, holding a science fair ribbon. A paragraph about how close we used to be. A line about family being forever. And then the kicker. I know we've had our rough patches. But don't let pride get in the way of healing. I still have your old room just like you left it. That part made me laugh. Like I'd ever want to go back to the room where she sat me down and told me she was reallocating resources towards something more promising. I drafted a dozen replies. Some brutal. Some clever. One that just said LOL and a screenshot of my bank account. But I didn't send any of them. I just closed the laptop. Instead, I opened the donation page for the Community College Scholarship Fund. I'd been contributing a little each month. This time, I made a bigger gift, enough to fund one student's semester outright. In the notes section I wrote, "For the kid whose mom thought lavender oils were worth more than their future." Petty? Maybe. But also poetic. Because while she was trying to guilt me with nostalgia, I was writing new memories, ones that didn't require permission or validation or a $90 face peel. Later that night, I sat on my balcony, feet up, laptop open, Miles Davis playing softly from the speaker. I sipped a cheap beer I didn't have to justify. Then I texted my old roommate Marcus. Remember when we had $7 between us and still got burritos? I just signed a retainer for $11,000. He replied in all caps. Bro. Then, dinner on you, finally? I texted back. Hell yeah. You pick the place. I'll bring the salt. It took me over a year to open the old storage bin. The one labeled college stuff. Taped shut. Buried behind camping gear I never used and broken IKEA parts one never got around to returning. Inside, a folder full of unopened acceptance letters, a faded Syracuse hoodie, and the college fund ledger printout my mom had proudly handed me when I turned 16, the one with the balance circled in red, like a promise. That balance now read $0. 00. Below it, scribbled in pencil, was a single note from her. For your future. We're so proud of you. I stared at that sentence like it was written by someone else. Because the woman who wrote it no longer existed, or maybe she never did. It hit me then. She hadn't just stolen my money. She'd stolen my moment. That rite of passage. That big. You did it. Moment where a kid gets launched into adulthood with the wind at their back, not a weight on their shoulders. But I also realized something else. I had survived anyway. Thrived even. Not because of her. But in spite of her. I closed the folder. Taped the box back up. Labeled it. Reminder, you did this without her. That week, I was invited to speak at a local entrepreneurship panel. Young professionals, recent grads, a couple high schoolers. I wore a gray button-up, the good one, and stood on stage beneath a projector that displayed my business logo in Comic Sans, a mistake, but also hilarious. Midway through my talk I spotted her. My mom. Back of the room. Quiet. Not dressed for guilt this time. Just jeans, a sweater, and that look, the one that said, "Maybe if I stand here long enough, he'll come talk to me." I didn't. Afterward, as I shook hands and posed for photos, she lingered near the hallway, waiting. When I finally walked by, she stepped forward. "Brandon," she said softly. "That was incredible." I nodded. "Thanks. Maybe we could talk? Just for a minute?" I paused. Then pointed to the exit. "I have somewhere to be." Her eyes dropped. "Right. Of course." She stepped aside. And I walked past her without looking back. Not because I was trying to hurt her. Because I was done letting her rewrite my story. That weekend I invited Marcus and Louise over. We grilled cheap steaks, blasted old school hip hop, and sat on my apartment floor talking about nothing in particular. Bruno the neighbor's dog barked the whole time. No one cared. At one point, Marcus raised his beer and said, "To Brandon. For surviving a $43,000 betrayal with nothing but a laptop and sheer spite." We laughed. And it felt good. Later, alone on my porch, I opened my notebook, the one where I jot down random business ideas and quotes. In the back I wrote, "You don't know anyone access just because they gave you life. Sometimes, survival is the success story." Then I flipped back to the first page. And wrote one final line. "That was my education. This is yours." She hasn't called since. And I haven't looked back.